So in my newsletter last week, I broke down why I walked away from a $100,000 a year in-house media job and wound up making 50% more that same year simply by staying freelance. Now, I wanted to unpack it a little bit further for you, the podcast audience. And if you're watching on video, just forgive me as I am glancing up and down at some notes I have on my phone so I don't get totally lost. Okay, so I came in to help a producer friend of mine start this satellite office for a European startup in New York City. So essentially the parent company was in Europe. This was a New York City satellite office. I had done similar short-term in-house stints before, but right out of the gate, this felt like it was on a different level. Once I was there, I quickly started to realize that things weren't all that they were cracked up to be. There were kind of some major problems I had with how things were run and just the culture in general. The first one was meetings. I don't know if you've ever had a full-time corporate job. I had a corporate tech support job after college, and meetings are the worst. And this particular place was on another level entirely. We had meetings, I kid you not, about other meetings that were going to happen later that day or later in the week. And I distinctly remember days going by where hardly anything got done or accomplished because we were all just sitting in some stupid conference room bullshitting about something. So too many meetings. That's right off the bat. Also, off of that, we realized that there's no real game plan to anything. It really just felt like a scramble to throw as much stuff at the wall as they could, see what stuck, and let everything else fall away. So basically, wasting time and wasting energy wasn't a concern. And to me, that's a huge concern. Now, all that being said, we did manage to make a small library of video content and get some sort of post-production pipeline in place over the 2 short months I was there. And let me be clear, as a freelancer, 2 months of a consistent paycheck is great. That is real money that lots of people need. I needed it at the time. But as you can guess, red flags just kept popping up and popping up and popping up that really made me second guess what I was doing there. Now, all this kind of culminated after those 2 months with whispers of bringing me in-house full-time. Now, those were just, the occasional hey, we're thinking about, doing something full-time. Would you be interested? Like that kind of thing. Just kind of water cooler type conversations. But once it became really formal, it got a little intense. There were emails about the role. There were office meetings about the role. I even had a coffee chat or two with the woman who was running the office. I was feeling a lot of pressure about coming in-house. They even said, this is good money. We don't understand what the big deal is. Well, to me, the big deal is putting everything else I was building on hold to come in and build something for somebody else. And I think that's a major concern for lots of people, especially in this day and age where all of our value is tied up in who we are and our authenticity and our ability to leverage our knowledge. Now, this was almost 10 years ago. It's just more heightened now. And all the doubts were circulating in my head for sure. You're being irresponsible. What if freelance work dries up? This could be your shot at security. All that was there, and those conversations still happen internally for lots of people, but they didn't outweigh the red flags that were popping up for me. And the straw that broke the camel's back was once I had the contract in front of me and the paperwork and all the stipulations and blah, 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 there was an addendum that basically said, if an employee wants to take outside freelance work, they must have written approval from management to do so. And right there, that was like, nope, deal breaker, not going to happen. Because that's basically an overstep in my book where the company now is trying to have sway over what I'm doing on my own time. And I'm sure people will argue back with me. Lots of big corporations have non-competes and blah, 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 things like that. But this was the first time it's ever been called out explicitly. You cannot take freelance work unless we say it's okay. So ultimately, I wound up turning down this role. Okay, it got a little sort of dramatic at the end, but long story short, I said no. The one thing I haven't mentioned is there was somebody else who was freelancing with me in the same role, and they wanted to bring us both in kind of as a 2-man video team. I turned down the job. He took it. Fast forward a year from there, he texted me or messaged me on Instagram, I don't remember which, basically saying, this is the worst. I'm ready to die, pull my hair out, whatever, you name it. And then a little bit further down the road from that, maybe on the order of almost 2 years, that whole office wound up getting shut down. Everybody I was working with there got laid off, had to find new employment elsewhere. And meanwhile, I had just kind of been cruising, building the freelance and creative entrepreneurship thing on the side over here. So what is the point of that whole story other than kind of bitching about what this role was? Okay, it has a point. The point is it is so important to be aligned with what you're pursuing and to trust your gut. Now, I did not always trust my gut when I was younger, and now it is the first thing I listen to. If you don't respect what your body's telling you, what your instincts are telling you, and that you don't feel aligned with the direction you're pursuing, nothing is going to work out positively for you, right? Think about it. If I had taken that in-house role, I never would have built my media company or gotten a bunch of the crazy, interesting cinematography opportunities that I've had. I never would have opened this podcast studio here, which has been, a really interesting, continually growing business venture for me. I wouldn't have worked with clients who become long-term partners, and I wouldn't have developed the systems that now I use to generate multiple revenue streams. None of that stuff would have happened. The brakes would have got stood on with 2 feet, and I would have stalled out and been jumping from job to job to job. Or if I decided to get back on the freelance train, it would have been an uphill battle. So the point is this: sit with yourself, align with yourself. Maybe it sounds a little woo-woo, but I feel like every creative should do this. Think about where you want to be. Think about the steps to get there and whether that vibes with the life that you want, right? And I've had lots of iterations and permutations of this over the years. I've been a professional working cinematographer for a long time. I always wanted to shoot big Hollywood movies or HBO shows, and I guess I could pursue that if I really wanted to. But now, as a middle-aged man with a young child and a family to love and care for, the priorities are totally different. I would rather make as much money as I possibly can, working as little as I possibly can, to spend as much time with the people I love as I possibly can. That's kind of my North Star. That's where I'm aligned. So where are you aligned? Write it down, jot it down on a piece of paper or a notebook. If you journal it out. If you do morning pages, which I highly recommend you try, look up The Artist's Way morning pages. Anything you do to get that stuff out of your head and kind of in front of you and figure out, where you're aligned and what feels good to you. I can't express how important that is because you can avoid all that frustration. Be clear with yourself about where you're going and where you're trying to wind up. And if you don't know, that's fine, but try to figure it out in steps. Write down thoughts, meditate if that's your thing, whatever you have to do to get aligned and more clear on where you want to go. I am where I am now because I'm getting more aligned as time goes on. So thank you for listening to this short little unpack of last week's newsletter. The newsletter is on Substack. You can find it at thedrewenglish.substack.com. Currently, it is called Creative Balance, but I think we have a name change in the works, which is going to be No Set Path, which is going to align it with this podcast. Again, alignment, it's a theme, and we're going to start doing some brand building around that. So thanks for stopping by, and I hope to see you soon.